Hey everybody, this is Miss Dietrich helping you on Lesson 28, Two-Step Equations for Module 4, Engage New York. And we're looking at a word problem that I personally think is very challenging to wrap your brain around it. The recommendation is to draw a tape diagram to help yourself figure out what to do. Let's look at the question. Dwayne scored 55 points in his last basketball game, which is 10 points more than his personal best. LeBron scored 15 points more than Chris in the same game. LeBron scored the same number of points as Dwayne's personal best. Let D represent the number of points Dwayne scored during his personal best, and C represent the number of Chris's points. Question A, how many points did Chris score during the game? And question B, if these are the only three players who scored, what was the team's total number of points at the end of the game? Now, the reason why I personally don't like the wording of this question is because if we're talking about him getting 10 points more than his personal best, then in my opinion, wouldn't 55 points be his personal best? So that's a little bit confusing to me, so I don't really like that aspect of this question. But if we just focus on this red box first, because here's what we know. We know that 55 points is the total that we're talking about here. And we know that each of these boxes, if we were to add up all the numbers that are in these boxes, would have to add up to be 55. So let's start with this red box first. We know that D has to be equal to 45 because 45 plus 10 would be equal to the 55. So if they're telling us to let D represent the number of points Dwayne scored during his personal best, then that means we're going to be writing this equation. D plus 10 equals 55. All right, so now let's take a look at what they say about LeBron, because they said LeBron scored 15 points more than Chris in the same game. So that means you're going to take what Chris scored, which was represented right here, and you'd have to add 15 to it. Now remember, we're still thinking about this 45. We're still thinking about that. So now here's what we have to say to ourselves. What plus 15 is going to equal 45 so that we can get the value for Chris? And wouldn't that be 30? So let's write that in for him. He's got to be 30. Now at the same time, you want to make sure that your tape diagrams, the boxes going all the way across, still add up to be the 55. Does 30 plus 15 plus 10 still equal the 55 to make sure that that's correct? All right, so we'll put 30 here because we know that that's Chris. Now, if we were to draw, or put an equation down for that, we would write something like this. C plus 15 plus the 10, if we're concerned about the 10 more than his personal best, equals 55. C plus 25, because we're combining these two things, equals 55, so that's where this comes in. And then we can conclude that the opposite of add 25 to a variable is to subtract 25 from a variable, and we can get 30. Now, if you're just looking at this as being equal to 45, your equation would be something like, some number plus 15 equals 45, and that equation would work as well. So here's what we know. We know Chris scored 30 points. And then if we're going to take the points that they each scored, so LeBron, what we're coming up with in this game anyway, if we're just looking at the red box, we have to say that he came up with the 45 points because we're not looking at the 10 point. He didn't earn that. He just earned what's in the red box. So that means if we take each person, we have the 55 for Dwayne, we have the 30 for Chris, and the 45 for LeBron, giving us a total of 130 points for the game. So the answer to part B is 130 points. All right, so again, I'm not a big fan of this question because it's a little confusing when you think about personal best. For me, for Dwayne, isn't that it's 55? So it's, we're talking about this game, we're talking about the last game, a little bit confusing. So hopefully you found this question a little bit easier than I did the first time, but if you look at the tape diagram, it helps you to understand a little bit better.